Are we alone? In the sense that, is there life out there? Is there intelligent life out there? Is there life on other planets, orbiting around other stars out there? What's amazing is that we happen to have the honor, the privilege, the unique joy of living during the time period where we're beginning to make some real progress with this question. This is the sort of question, you know, people have wondered about for a long time, dreamed, thought, imagined, written novels about, made movies about. We're finally at an actual point in history where we're being able to do real science. Now, obviously, we haven't found anything or anybody yet, but we're at the point now where we're beginning to address some of the really big, cool, amazing, interesting questions. So if we're going to do this scientifically, we got to start with facts. Okay? Fact number one. My body, I'm a living organism, okay? I'm looking for life in the universe. And my body functions because there are certain chemicals in my body, and there are laws of chemistry and physics and energy and these sorts of things that allow all living organisms to work. They're all, you know, we're all made of cells, and then there are all these molecules in there like DNA and proteins and fats and all these sorts of things that allow different cells to do different things, and muscle cells and blood cells and all the different cells that make up our bodies. And these operate because of certain basic physical laws. There are the right chemicals that make me up and the physical laws and all this. When I look out into the universe, it's the same physical laws everywhere. When I point my telescope at the most distant galaxy and I study, well, what's the chemical composition of this galaxy? Is this made of strange, interesting, unusual, bizarre things? No. It's made of the exact same stuff that I'm made of. I point my telescope off at the most distant objects we can see, and I see hydrogen and carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and iron and sulfur and silicon and all these elements that we find here on Earth. And I see that all these stars are orbiting around by the same gravity that works here, the same laws of heat and light and pressure and energy and all these things that allow living organisms, all living organisms here on the Earth to work. These are present throughout the whole universe. The laws are the same everywhere. So there's a fact. Here's another fact. The universe is big. All right. Our life on Earth exists almost entirely as a result of energy from the sun. And our sun is a star. It's a typical, average, ordinary, utterly boring star. And there are an enormous number of stars out there. The laws are the same everywhere, and sun-like stars are common. Sun-like stars are the majority of stars out there. Oh yeah, they vary in mass a little bit. You know, a few are more massive than the sun, most are less massive than the sun. But typically, you know, they're made of the same stuff. All the stars are made of 70% hydrogen, about 30% helium, traces of other stuff. When we start going out there and count them, well, let's see. In our Milky Way galaxy, there's several hundred billion other stars. Most of them are very similar to our sun. And then when we start counting up all the other galaxies out there, we take the Hubble Deep Field, we count all the galaxies in a tiny little patch of sky, and a little tiny little patch of sky, and okay, yeah, you get about several thousand galaxies in this thing. You multiply it over there, and right now, with the mighty Hubble Space Telescope, we can see several hundred billion other galaxies, each one containing an average of several hundred billion other stars. You multiply that together, several hundred billion stars per galaxy times several hundred galaxies currently visible in the present-day universe. And right now, what this means is that currently we can see about 10 to the 23 stars out there. The vast majority of them are similar to the sun in very, sorts of ways. And so it's like, and this is a lower limit. I mean, give us better space telescopes, we will see more. So the question is, if there are all these other sun-like stars out there, and then they all have, the same laws and all that sort of thing, life formed here on the Earth, I would expect then that probably these other sun-like stars, many of them probably have Earth-like planets that would have similar conditions. So these are facts. So then the question is, why not? Why shouldn't life be out there? I mean, even if you think life is rare, even if you think life is a very unusual thing, good grief, that number is enormous. Even if I'm going to be fantastically skeptical, and I'm going to say that only, maybe guess that only 1 star in a million has an Earth-like planet orbiting around. And only of those 1 in a million Earth-like planets actually has an atmosphere and an ocean like the Earth does. And only of those, maybe 1 in a million of those formed life. So I take that 10 to the 23rd stars, I divide it by a million 3 times, and I would still have 100,000 stars out there which would have a planet where life would have formed. I mean, the number is so enormous, so vast, so fantastically huge that it just overwhelms my skepticism. I mean, I have trouble imagining a universe this big with this many stars where life would not have formed out there somewhere. Our universe is so big, it must have formed out there somewhere else. The question is it close enough that we can find it? If life is very rare, if it's only 1 in a million stars and 1 in a million planets and 1 in a million oceans and blah, blah, well, then probably there are no other planets that have life in our galaxy. And that's where we can look. Our region of the Milky Way galaxy is where we might, within conceivable technology, the next generation or so, really be able to do a serious scientific search for life on Earth-like planets orbiting around Sun-like stars around here in our neck of the woods. If life is really rare, then probably we're the only life in this area. And if it's not, well, that would be really cool. So, let's start with thinking about what life is and how it exists in its history here on Earth. Life and Earth. Every living organism in the whole, life is very diverse on the Earth. You have animals and plants and microscopic things and giant blue whales and trees and flies and all sorts of crazy things. But all life on Earth is composed of cells. If you're a bacteria, you have 1. If you're me, you've got a lot more than 1. But all life is based on cells. So when you start putting life under a microscope, it looks very, very similar. And the more you zoom in, the more all living organisms look identical. And when I look beyond the cell, well, the cells have certain basic components. And then I look beyond the cells, well, cells are made of molecules. And every living organism on Earth is made of the same set of molecules. Every living organism ever discovered has DNA and all the instructions for life, and then that works with RNA, and this makes things like proteins, which are made of amino acids, and then you've got fats, and you've got sugars, and basically the same set of molecules make every living organism on Earth. It's just that they're organized in different ways. We're all made of the same set of paints. It's just that, we're all painted in different pictures, and so that's an interesting thing. And when we start, and then of course, these molecules are made of atoms, which are totally common. They're made of carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and phosphorus and sulfur and, traces of all sorts of things like this. But these are the basic atoms that life is made of, and these atoms are everywhere. We even find bits of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, in the dust between the stars. These atoms are everywhere. So that's really interesting. The ingredients of life appear really common out there. And, of course, living organisms need a source of energy, but that's easy too. Stars supply that. We know the stars are common. There is one thing. If I'm gonna search for life out there, we're gonna start with life as we know it. Life similar to us. Life in general made of this sort of thing. Now, maybe it's possible to make life in a totally different way. I don't know, but I know for sure you can make life out of this set of molecules. So if I want to look for life like that, what do I want to look for? And all the stuff you need for life is really common except for one thing. There's one ingredient that is present in every living organism on Earth, which is really rare in the universe. Almost everything it takes for life is simple and common and ordinary, and you find it everywhere. But there's one ingredient for life, which is fantastically rare in the universe. And every living cell ever discovered on Earth contains a substantial percentage of liquid water. Liquid water. And liquid water is very rare. Everything else is common. All the atoms we're looking for, all these things, very, 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 very common. But liquid water is a very rare substance. Well, because, first of all, you got to be the right range of temperatures. Too hot, your water boils away. Too cold, it freezes. And so that means there's a narrow range of temperatures where you can have liquid water. So you got to have the right temperatures. If you're on the surface of a planet, that means you have to be the right distance away from your star. The right distance away from a star where, it's not too hot where the water would boil or too cold where the water would freeze. We call this the habitable zone. The habitable zone is the distance from a star where water could, not necessarily is, but could be liquid on the surface. So you got to have the right range of temperatures. In addition to that, you also need pressure. It is impossible for liquid water to exist floating blob-like out in space because there's no pressure out in space. Right now I've got a weight of this atmosphere above me, 100 miles of air between here and me, here in space. And so there's 15 pounds of pressure on every square inch of everything down here. So that allows liquids to exist. Here on the surface of the Earth you can have solid, liquid, or gas. Out in space, everything's either solid or gas. Liquids require pressure, so you also need an atmosphere. Atmosphere. For instance, it is impossible to have liquid water exist on the moon, or liquid water to exist on Mercury, both lack of atmosphere and too hot. And on Mars today, it is impossible for liquid water to exist because its atmosphere is not thick enough. There's not enough pressure there. Any water you pour out on the surface of Mars would immediately boil away and freeze, turn into gas and solid at once. So this is the rare thing. So if we're looking for life as we know it, life similar to life that we know could exist, then we're looking for liquid water. That's really, really rare in the universe. That's not a common thing. And so that seems to be the magic ingredient. Why life formed here on Earth? Life on Earth formed in the oceans. So let's think about history of life on Earth. History of life on Earth. Life certainly formed first in the Earth's oceans. These oceans of salt water that cover the Earth. Our blood, the saltiness of our blood is about the saltiness in the oceans. Basically, our blood is an ocean that we carry around with us so that we can get up on land and do all these sorts of things. Certainly formed in the oceans. Probably the first life, in order to form, probably things like, getting energy from the sun. Photosynthesis was probably too complicated. That's a really complicated, interesting process. Photosynthesis is just amazing, wicked amazing biochemistry stuff going on there. Probably the first life got much simpler sorts of things, was getting chemical energy, probably from, biologists have speculated, maybe from some of the heating vents at the bottom of the Earth's ocean where you got a little volcanic stuff kind of bubbling up, and that heat energy and then the chemicals surrounding that probably would provide a very simple source of energy. So somehow when these crazy chemicals get together and through some crazy amazingness organize themselves into the first living cells, they were probably not doing photosynthesis. Oceans probably near volcanic vents. Basically, today we know that every living organism on Earth probably descended, we're all related, we're all connected to each other. So some cells formed somehow. The biologists are still working out the details of that. There's a lot of mysteries to be found out there. But however it happened, then these organisms then diversified and adapted and evolved, and they became all the living organism things on Earth. Another key fact in the history of life on Earth is that life has been around for a long time. We have clear evidence going back at least 3.5 billion years. Remember, the Earth formed only about 4.5 billion years ago. So we have, life. And then probably when we start looking at chemical evidence, even in older and older, some of the oldest rocks, the evidence goes back to around 3.85 billion years. Probable life. And now these first life, these simple one-celled, bacterial sorts of things like this. Simple life. On the other hand, when you study the history of life on Earth, this is fascinating. Okay, so basically, the Earth forms 4.5 billion years ago. Initially, it's volcanoes erupting, blam, 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 everywhere. No life's going to form. Finally, once the Earth calms down, settles down, actually forms an ocean, and can actually have these volcanic vents and the right chemicals bubbling around in the ocean, life forms relatively fast. Among some of the very oldest rocks we have on Earth, from the oldest stuff, we're talking 3.85 billion years ago, almost back to the formation of the Earth itself, we find simple chemical evidence that there were very, very, very simple organisms existing in the Earth's oceans. And then life remained simple and microscopic for a very, very long time. Life didn't become big and live behind really big fossils until about 550 million years ago, the Cambrian period. So, Cambrian, that's when it gets big and interesting. And that is a very interesting thing. That life formed so fast but took so long to get complicated. Maybe that tells us about what life might be like when we study it elsewhere.